Every once in a while, a car appears that seems to have skipped several decades of automotive evolution. The machine you're looking at today is one of those rare creations. At first glance, most people assume it belongs somewhere in the early 1950s or even the beginning of the jet age. Its smooth teardrop body, enclosed rear wheel, aerodynamic profile, and unusual proportions looked nothing like the average American automobile of the late 1930s. Yet this remarkable vehicle first appeared in 1937. It wasn't built by Ford, General Motors, Chrysler, or any other major manufacturer. Instead, it was the dream of one determined businessman who believed the American automobile industry had become too conservative. He wanted to build a car that was lighter, faster, more economical, safer, and more efficient than anything on the road. The result was the Airomobile Experimental Sedan, one of the most ambitious prototypes ever constructed in the United States. Although only a single fully completed sedan survives today, its influence quietly reached much farther than most people realize, proving that sometimes even unsuccessful automobiles can leave a lasting mark on engineering history. The story begins with Paul M. Lewis, an entrepreneur from Philadelphia who wasn't satisfied with the direction American automobiles were taking during the mid-1930s. Cars were becoming larger every year, fuel consumption continued to rise, and manufacturers seemed more interested in chrome trim than genuine engineering progress. Rather than keeping the idea to himself, he assembled an impressive engineering team. Among those recruited was the brilliant Dutch-born designer John Tjaarda, already famous for creating the revolutionary Lincoln Zephyr. Tjaarda understood streamlined design better than almost anyone in America. Lewis also hired former Franklin engineers Carl Doman and Edward Marks, specialists in air-cooled power plants. With such experienced people working together, the Aeromobile immediately became far more than another garage experiment. It evolved into one of the most technically advanced, independent automobile projects of its era. Perhaps the most surprising feature of the Aeromobile wasn't its futuristic body, but what lay beneath it. Instead of using a conventional water-cooled inline engine like nearly every American manufacturer, the engineers developed a completely new 129.9 cubic inch horizontally opposed four-cylinder engine with overhead valves and air cooling. Producing approximately 60 horsepower, the compact flat four was mounted at the front of the car and drove the front wheels through a specially designed transaxle. Today that layout sounds perfectly ordinary, but in 1937 it bordered on revolutionary. Most American automobiles still relied on front-mounted engines driving the rear axle through long driveshafts and solid rear axles. Eliminating the driveshaft reduced weight, lowered the floor, increased interior space, and improved traction on slippery roads. Air cooling removed the radiator, water pump, hoses, and coolant altogether, reducing maintenance while eliminating the possibility of freezing during harsh American winters. Even more remarkably, this engine did not disappear after the Aeromobile project ended. Its basic architecture eventually evolved into the famous Franklin aircraft engines, powering numerous light airplanes throughout the 1940s and beyond. In a sense, although the Aeromobile never entered production, its heart ultimately found a second life in the skies. Then came perhaps the boldest engineering decision of all. The Aeromobile rode on only 3 wheels. 2 driven wheels sat at the front, while a single non-driven wheel supported the rear of the vehicle. At first glance, this arrangement appears unstable, yet Lewis and his engineers had carefully calculated the weight distribution. With the engine positioned over the front axle, most of the vehicle's mass rested on the driven wheels, improving grip and directional stability. The rear wheels simply followed behind, reducing mechanical complexity, lowering rolling resistance, and decreasing overall weight. The entire car weighed only about 2,200 pounds, hundreds of pounds lighter than comparable American sedans of the period. Thanks to its streamlined body, low mass, and efficient powertrain, the Airomobile reportedly achieved nearly 43 miles per gallon, an astonishing figure in 1937. Top speed approached 80 miles per hour, proving that outstanding fuel economy didn't necessarily require sacrificing performance. At a time when many manufacturers believed larger engines were the only path to higher speeds, Lewis demonstrated that intelligent engineering could accomplish the same goal with far less fuel. One of the most overlooked engineering achievements was the suspension and chassis layout. The front suspension used an independent design with coil springs, helping each front wheel react separately to bumps in the road while maintaining better tire contact during cornering. At the rear, the single wheel was mounted on a specially engineered trailing arm arrangement that kept the vehicle remarkably stable, despite having only one wheel behind the cabin. Engineers spent countless hours balancing weight distribution to ensure that the unusual three-wheel configuration behaved naturally even during emergency maneuvers. Many people assume that three-wheeled automobiles must be unstable, but because the Airomobile placed its two steering and driven wheels at the front, the design was inherently more predictable than the reverse layout used by many later three-wheelers. Combined with the car's relatively low center of gravity and lightweight flat-four engine, the Airomobile developed a reputation among test drivers as being surprisingly easy to control. It was another reminder that unconventional engineering does not necessarily produce unconventional driving behavior. The body itself looked as though it had arrived from another decade. Every curve served a purpose. The rounded nose gently divided the airflow before guiding it smoothly over the windshield and roof. The sides tapered gradually toward the tail, minimizing turbulence behind the vehicle. Even the rear wheel was almost completely enclosed to reduce aerodynamic drag. Unlike many streamliners of the era that merely looked aerodynamic, the Airomobile was actually developed with airflow in mind. Its proportions reflected the same scientific thinking then transforming aircraft design. John Tjaarda believed beauty naturally emerged from efficiency, and the Airomobile embodied that philosophy perfectly. The narrow front track, smooth fenders, integrated headlights, and gently sloping roof created a silhouette unlike anything produced in Detroit at the time. Many people who encounter photographs today assume the car dates from the late 1940s or early 1950s, making it all the more remarkable that these ideas had already taken shape before the Second World War had even begun. The Airomobile wasn't simply a beautiful prototype sitting under bright lights at an auto show. Paul Lewis understood that impressive engineering meant very little unless the car could survive everyday driving. So the company launched an extensive real-world testing program. Over the course of development, the prototype accumulated more than 45,000 miles on American roads, traveling through busy cities, mountain highways, rough rural routes, and countless miles of ordinary pavement. Engineers carefully monitored fuel consumption, cooling efficiency, suspension performance, and overall reliability. Reports from those involved with the project suggested that the lightweight chassis and front-wheel drive layout gave the car surprisingly predictable handling, while the air-cooled engine proved dependable even under demanding conditions. These road tests weren't publicity stunts. They were genuine attempts to convince investors that the Airomobile was ready for production. Unlike many futuristic concepts that never moved under their own power, this was a fully functional automobile that demonstrated its capabilities day after day. The company became so confident in the design that brochures and promotional material proudly described it as the beginning of a completely new generation of American transportation, rather than just another experimental prototype. Unfortunately, building a revolutionary automobile requires far more than good engineering. By the late 1930s, America's automotive industry was dominated by enormous manufacturers with vast production facilities, nationwide dealer networks, and financial resources that independent companies simply couldn't match. Even though the Airomobile generated considerable interest wherever it appeared, attracting investors proved far more difficult than expected. Eventually, the project stalled before full-scale production could begin. Only a handful of prototypes were completed, and today just a single, fully restored experimental sedan survives as a reminder of what might have been. Today, the surviving 1937 Airomobile Experimental Sedan occupies a unique place in automotive history. It isn't remembered because it won famous races or achieved record-breaking sales. Instead, it represents something far more valuable: the courage to question every accepted engineering rule of its time. While larger manufacturers refined existing ideas, Paul Lewis and his engineers dared to imagine an entirely different future. They combined aviation technology, innovative packaging, advanced aerodynamics, front-wheel drive, lightweight construction, and exceptional fuel economy into a single automobile years before those concepts became fashionable. Standing beside the Aeromobile today, it's impossible not to feel a sense of admiration for the people who believed that progress required bold thinking rather than small improvements. Sometimes the greatest automobiles aren't the ones that change the market immediately. They're the ones that quietly inspired the future. If you enjoy discovering forgotten prototypes, visionary engineers, and incredible automobiles that were decades ahead of their time, make sure to subscribe to On Wheels. There are still countless hidden gems waiting to be uncovered, and some of the most fascinating stories in automotive history are the ones almost nobody remembers today.